The morning she changed the locks, the sky was painfully blue. I remember standing there, keys in my hand, heart pounding, wondering how a house that once smelled like home could suddenly feel like a stranger's. My name is Priya, and this is the story of how love, trust, and a single door key taught me everything I know about belonging. I moved into my husband's family home to care for his aging mother. I thought I was joining a family. I didn't realize I was walking into a house built on quiet debts and louder secrets. They say every lock has a story. I just never thought mine would start with the sound of it closing behind me. That single moment still replays in my mind, as clearly as the morning sunlight that spilled across her marble veranda. Her wrinkled hand pressing the house keys into my palm, her smile trembling just a little, the faint scent of sandalwood that always clung to her shawl. I remember thinking this was the start of something good, a new chapter, a family coming together. I was wrong, because 3 months later I stood outside the same gate, holding grocery bags in both hands, the sun burning my neck, and those keys, the very ones she had given me, refused to turn in the lock. When I married Arav, I didn't just marry a man. I married his mother, his home, his memories, and all the invisible expectations that came with them. He was a civil engineer, quiet, methodical, rarely angry. The kind of man who noticed when the fan made a noise, but not when I was hurting. His mother, Meera Devi, had been a widow for nearly 15 years. A proud woman in her late 60s, elegant in pressed cotton saris, and always in control of her finances, her house, her only son. When she fell ill with arthritis last year, Arav suggested we move into her ancestral home in Lucknow. Just for a few months, he had said, until she gets better. I hesitated. We had built our own little flat in the city, small, messy, full of laughter. But I told myself this was what good wives did. They helped, they adjusted, they took care of family. So we moved. The first few weeks was surprisingly peaceful. Mornings began with the clinking of Meera Devi's bangles as she brewed her cardamom tea. The smell of sandalwood incense drifted through the house. I would water the tulsi plant near the gate and she'd tell me small stories about Arav's childhood. How he used to hide laddus under his bed. How he cried on his first day of school. Sometimes she'd call me beta, daughter. It warmed something inside me. At night, we'd sit on the terrace. The city lights twinkled below and she'd say, when I'm gone, this house will be yours and Arav's. Promise me you'll keep it alive. I promised. That's the thing about trust. It always sounds like love when you first hear it. The first sign came quietly, like a faint crack in a glass that no one notices until it shatters. It was a Sunday morning. Meera Devi was in her prayer room when the doorbell rang. A man stood outside, middle-aged, neatly dressed, holding a folder. Is Mrs. Meera home? He asked. I called her. The moment she saw him, her face changed. That polite warmth vanished. She stepped outside and shut the door behind her. From the kitchen window, I could see her hands moving sharply as they spoke. After a few minutes, the man left. Who was that? I asked gently. Wrong address, she said too quickly. Later, I found a crumpled paper under the shoe rack. A bank notice, her name, the house address, overdue payment. When I showed it to Arav, he frowned. Must be a mistake. Ma doesn't have any loans. I wanted to believe him. But something in her eyes that day, the flash of fear when I mentioned the paper, told me it wasn't a mistake. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things. Phone calls she'd taken whispers, envelopes tucked into the drawer behind her medicines, the way she flinched when Arav mentioned property tax. Then, one evening as I was folding laundry, she came into the room with a set of keys. These are for you, she said, handing them over. House keys. You'll need them when I go to the temple or rest. I smiled, grateful, touched even. She smiled back, but her eyes were far away. It should have felt like trust. It felt like a warning I couldn't name. It was a Thursday.
I remember because the milkman always came late on Thursdays and Meera Devi liked her tea early. I stepped out to buy milk from the corner shop. Arav had already left for work. The air smelled of rain, the kind that never really comes but teases you all morning. When I came back, barely 10 minutes later, the gate wouldn't open. I jangled the keys, tried again, nothing. I called out, "Ma, it's me." No answer. I thought maybe she had locked the inner door too, so I rang the bell. Silence. I called her phone, switched off. A few neighbors were watching now, whispering. My cheeks burned. I laughed awkwardly, pretending to fumble with the keys again. But deep down, a cold realization was settling. This wasn't an accident. When Arav came home that evening, he used a different key to open the gate. Inside, Meera Devi sat in the living room, calm, as if nothing had happened. "What's going on?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes soft but unyielding. "I changed the locks," she said simply. My breath caught. "Why?" "It's my house, beta. I need to feel safe." "Safe? From me?" Arav stood frozen, his bag still slung on his shoulder. "Ma, you can't just—" "She can stay somewhere else for a while," Meera interrupted, her voice sharp now. "I need space. Too much noise, too much interference." I stared at her. "Interference? I cook for you, I clean your room, You also question my visitors, my phone calls," she snapped. "I've lived alone for years. I don't need supervision." For a moment, the room blurred. The words hit harder than I expected. I turned to Arav. "Say something." He looked between us, his mother's stern face, my trembling one. "Finally," he said softly, "let's just stay somewhere else for a few days, till things calm down." That was the moment something inside me broke. Not from the betrayal itself, but from his silence. Because silence, I learned that day, can be louder than cruelty. That night I packed a small bag, just a few clothes, my documents and the keys she had given me. The useless keys. When I walked out of the gate, she didn't look up from her prayers. Outside, the sky had finally started to rain. We rented a small apartment near Arav's office. One bedroom, cracked walls, and the faint smell of paint thinner that refused to leave no matter how much incense I burned. Arav barely spoke those first few days. He left early, came home late, always tired, always distracted. I tried to talk about what had happened, but he'd say, "Please, Priya, I don't want to argue. She's old. Let's give her time." Time. That word can heal, but it can also rot things. I spent my days scrolling through property sites, cooking meals he didn't touch, and staring at the one window that faced her house down the lane. Sometimes I saw her silhouette watering the plants, the same tulsi I once tended. It hurt. But more than that, something didn't add up. If she'd wanted me gone, she could have just said so. Why the drama? Why the changed locks, the secrecy, the guilt in her eyes? One afternoon, while sorting our papers, I came across a brown envelope, Arav's name scribbled on the corner. Inside were old property documents, utility bills, and tucked between them, another bank notice. Same bank, same overdue payment, but this one mentioned foreclosure, and the date was recent. The house was in trouble, and she'd still kicked us out. That evening, I waited for Arav. When he came home, I laid the papers on the table. "She's in debt," I said quietly, "and we're not just talking about small loans." He rubbed his forehead. "There must be a mistake. Ma's too careful with money." "Then explain this." I pushed the notice towards him. "And the man who came that day with a folder. She said wrong address. Arav, she's hiding something big." He sighed. "Even if she is, it's her business." "Her business? That's your ancestral home. If the bank takes it, we all lose it." For a moment, his composure cracked. She'd never risk that. But his eyes, they flickered. Just once. Doubt. A few days later, when Arav left for work, I took an auto and went back to the house. The new lock gleamed in the sunlight. I rang the bell. She opened the door slowly, her expression unreadable. What are you doing here? I just came to check on you, I lied. You looked tired last week. She hesitated, then let me in. The house looked different, boxes piled near the corner, photos missing from the walls. The air smelt of old incense and something else, dampness, fear. As she poured tea, I noticed a file half hidden under a cushion. A red bank stamp on the corner. I reached out before I could stop myself. Ma, are you? Don't touch that. Her voice was sharp enough to slice the air. I froze. She grabbed the file, clutching it to her chest. You think you're clever, don't you? Snooping around like some detective. Ma, I'm trying to help. Help? She laughed bitterly. You came into my house and started running it like it was yours. You don't understand what it means to protect something that's been in your family for generations. Her words hit me like slaps, not because they were cruel, but because they were full of fear. What are you protecting, Ma? I whispered. For the first time, her voice faltered. Go home, Priya. Just go. I left, but I knew she wasn't protecting the house. She was hiding something inside it.
That night, Arav got a call. He stepped out to answer it, and when he came back, his face was pale. It was the bank, he said quietly. They called about the house. I waited. She took multiple loans, not just one. Mortgaged the property years ago after Papa died. The interest piled up. They've been sending notices for months. I sat down. The room spun slightly. So she knew she was losing the house. He nodded. Why didn't she tell you? She probably thought she could fix it herself. Fix it how? Then I remembered the man with the folder, the late night calls, the envelopes. There was more. The next morning, I went to the bank. The manager, an older gentleman, looked hesitant when I introduced myself. Mrs. Mira Davy, I said. I'm her daughter-in-law. We're trying to understand what's happening. He sighed. Madam, she's taken several private loans as well, from individuals, some under different names. Different names? He pulled up a record. Mira Sarin. She used that alias for small property investments. My heart thudded. What kind of investments? Plots of land, some near the outskirts. But there were losses, heavy ones. She tried to flip them, but the buyers backed out. Losses, loans, lies. It all made sense now. She hadn't changed the locks to keep me out. She'd done it to keep the debt collectors out, to make it seem like no one lived there. And yet, she had looked me in the eye and told me I was the problem. That evening, I told Arav everything. He listened silently, jaw clenched, eyes unfocused. When I finished, he said softly, "We have to help her." I stared at him. Help her? She threw us out, Arav. She's still my mother. I looked away. And I'm your wife. The silence between us that night was colder than any winter I'd ever known.
A week later, a bank officer arrived at our rented flat. He handed Arav a notice. Final possession date, 2 weeks. Arav sank onto the sofa, eyes wide. We can't let them take it. You mean the house? I asked. It's Ma's pride. It'll destroy her. So would her lies, I thought. Still, something inside me softened. Maybe because, despite everything, I knew what that house meant to him, to them. That night, I called Mira Davy. She didn't answer, so I went there again. When she saw me, she didn't shout. She looked tired, smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves were pressing in on her. I sat across from her. They're taking the house. Ma? She closed her eyes. I know.
Why didn't you tell us?" Her voice trembled. "Because I didn't want him to see me fail. After his father died, I swore I'd protect everything, but I trusted the wrong people. A man said he'd help me invest. I thought I could double the money for Arif's future. I didn't realize it was all fake until it was too late." Tears slid down her face, quiet, almost hidden. "Then why did you throw me out?" Her eyes met mine, guilty, broken. "Because when they started coming to the house, I thought if you weren't there, they wouldn't threaten you. You don't know the kind of men I dealt with. I was trying to keep you safe." I sat there, numb. All this time, I'd painted her as a villain, and yet the truth was tangled, complicated, painfully human. She had lied, yes, but out of fear, not malice. Still, fear doesn't excuse cruelty. "I would have helped you." "I know," she said, almost too softly to hear. "That's why I couldn't let you." Arav came the next morning. When he saw his mother sitting at the table, shoulders hunched, he didn't say anything, just walked over and touched her hand. That one touch broke something in all of us. For the next few hours, we went through every document, every receipt, every loan paper she'd hidden. Some were so old the ink had begun to fade. Others were recent, written in a rush, signatures trembling. It wasn't just debt, it was a maze. Fake investments, duplicate accounts, property disputes. Arav ran his hands through his hair. "This will take months to fix." She nodded, eyes downcast. I wanted to scream, to ask why she didn't trust us before everything collapsed, but I held back, because in that silence, I saw something I hadn't seen before: regret. And regret, when real, has its own language.
2 days later, the bank sent officers again. They gave us the final notice. 1 week. We had a choice: either vacate voluntarily or face eviction. That night, I walked through the house for what I thought might be the last time. Each room held a story. The mirror where I'd adjusted my wedding veil. The kitchen shelf where she'd kept her spices labeled in neat handwriting. The veranda where Arav's father's photograph still hung, smiling at a family that was breaking quietly under the weight of secrets. I stopped at the tulsi plant near the entrance, now dry, leaves brown and curled. I watered it anyway. Because that's what you do when love hurts. You nurture it even as it dies, hoping it might bloom one last time. The next morning, a man came to the door. Middle-aged, expensive watch, the kind of confidence that smells of money and lies. He looked at Meera Devi and smiled faintly. "Mrs. Saran," he said. My heart froze. The alias. She turned pale. "You shouldn't be here." "Come now," he said smoothly. "You took my money, remember? I told you, pay me back or sell the house. You can't hide behind family drama forever." Arav stepped forward. "Who are you?" The man smirked. "Someone your mother owes 20 lakh rupees." 20 lakh? I felt my stomach twist. He took a step closer. "You think the bank's the problem? Son, I'm the one who introduced her to those investments, and I want my share back." Arav's voice was sharp. "Leave before I call the police." The man laughed. "Police? Go ahead. But remember, she signed the papers willingly. Fraud or not, it's all in her name." When he left, Meera Devi collapsed onto the chair, shaking. "I was desperate. He said he could double the money in months. I thought I was doing it for Arav. I didn't realize I was selling our peace." Arav turned away, his jaw tight. "And now he owns us." That night, Arav didn't come home. He stayed at the house helping her with paperwork, calling lawyers, trying to negotiate. I sat alone in the rented apartment, staring at the clock, every tick louder than the last. It wasn't jealousy, it was fear. Fear that no matter what I did, I'd always be the outsider. The one who came later, loved later, trusted last. When he finally returned near dawn, his eyes were red. I can't do this anymore, he said quietly. My heart sank. Do what? Fight everyone. The bank, the brokers, you, her. It's too much. I took a deep breath. So what now? I'm going to sell my share of the company. Maybe that'll pay part of it off. And what about us, Arav? He looked at me, tired, hollow. Us? Priya, I don't even know what us means right now. The words hit harder than any slap.
3 days later, Meera Devi fell unconscious in the courtyard. Stress, dehydration, exhaustion. The doctor said it could have been worse. I sat by her bedside, watching her chest rise and fall, her hand cold against mine. When she woke up, she whispered, "Don't let them take the house, Beta. I know I don't deserve to ask, but please." I wanted to tell her that a home isn't walls and bricks, it's the people inside it. But she wouldn't have understood. For her, that house was her identity, the last piece of a life she'd built with her husband. So I nodded. Because sometimes love means lying to someone so they can breathe a little easier. Over the next week, I did what she couldn't. I met the bank officials. I called the loan agent. I found the man's company records and discovered half his contracts were illegal. When I told Arav, he looked at me in disbelief. "You did all this?" I had to. You were busy trying to fix her mistakes with guilt. Someone had to fix them with logic. We went to the police together, filed a complaint. The man was arrested 2 days later for defrauding multiple elderly homeowners. The case didn't erase the loans, but it bought us time. Enough time to refinance, restructure, and breathe again.
Months passed. The walls were repainted. The tulsi bloomed again. One evening as the sun dipped low, Meera Devi called me to the courtyard. She held out a small key, the same one she'd used to change the locks months ago. "This belongs to you now," she said quietly. I hesitated. "Ma?" She smiled faintly. "You were right to question me, right to fight me. I thought I was protecting my family, but you were the one who actually did." I took the key, fingers trembling. "I never wanted your son. I wanted a home, and somehow I lost both." She touched my hand. "Then take them back, both." At that moment, Arav stepped into the courtyard carrying key. His eyes met mine. Tired, yes, but softer. He placed a cup beside me and said, "You were right about everything. I should have listened sooner." I smiled faintly. "No, you listened when it mattered." It's been a year. The house stands. Smaller, humbler maybe, but alive. We still argue, we still disagree, but there's something different now. Truth. And I've learned something. Love doesn't die in betrayal. It dies in silence. When we finally started talking, really talking, that's when everything began to heal. Meera Devi still prays at the Tulsi every morning. Arav's back at work, lighter somehow. And me? I sit on the veranda watching the same street where it all began. Sometimes life doesn't give you closure in grand moments. Sometimes it gives you peace in the quiet ones, when you realize the people who broke you didn't mean to. They were just broken too.